Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May 3rd. It's National Garden Meditation Day, so take advantage of that. All right, today in garden history, we kick things off by remembering Thomas Tusser, the English poet and farmer who died on this day, May 3rd, in 1580. In 1573, just 7 years before his death, Thomas wrote his 500 Points of Good Husbandry, and he advised the following. In January, the housewife should be busy planting peas and beans and setting young rose roots. During March and April, she should work from morning to night, sowing and setting her garden plot to produce the crops of parsnip, beans, and melons, which will, quote, winnest the heart of a laboring man for her later in the year. Her strawberry plants will be obtained from the best roots, which she has gathered from the woods, and berries from these plants will be harvested later the same year, and perhaps will be a useful backup if the parsnips have failed to win the man of her dreams. So there you go, a little garden/dating advice from Thomas Tusser over 500 years ago. And it was during this week in 1941 that Martha Crone, the American botanist and horticulturist, wrote some entries in her Minneapolis diary that reflect the wild swings in temperatures that can be so frustrating to gardeners in the shoulder seasons. Here's what she wrote. At the start of May, she writes, the weather is still very warm, 81 high, 59 for the low, and flowers coming out everywhere. Everything at least 2 weeks in advance, like midsummer. Many insects and flies out. Violets never so beautiful, as well as trillium and other flowers. And then on the 3rd of May, she writes, bitter cold all day. 49 the high, 41 the low. Stove going continuously, but no mosquitoes. By the 8th, she writes, heat unbearable, 88 for the high, 60 for the low. And by the 19th of May, she was writing, hottest so far. So there we go. All right, and it was on this day, May 3rd in 1942, that Charles Kikuchi wrote in his Japanese internment camp journal, these industrious Japanese, they just don't seem to know how to take it easy. They've worked so hard all their lives that they just can't stand idleness or waste. Well, as you probably know from your history books, 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were mandated to relocate to one of 10 relocation camps in the exclusion zone that was made up of Oregon, California, Western Washington, and Southern Arizona by order of the president. Ken Helpand's fantastic 2006 book called Defiant Gardens, Making Gardens in Wartime, devotes an entire chapter to telling the story about the gardens that were created in these camps. Now, the gardens were part of an effort by Japanese Americans to make the camps more bearable. And in addition to gardens, they created orchards, parks, baseball diamonds, playgrounds, and farms. In Defiant Gardens, Ken wrote, entry gardens were part of the Japanese tradition of dooryard gardens, linking household to community, displaying the craft and skill of the resident, and many people inscribed their names in cement at the doorstep. Now, the barracks gardens displayed great variety using gathered cacti and rocks, transplanted plants, and plants propagated in the camp nursery. And while people waited daily for the meals at the mess hall, they enjoyed the elaborate displays of great artistry and effort that characterized the mess hall gardens. And these gardens were the most closely identified with the Japanese-American garden tradition. All of these gardens together brought beauty to the camps and reinforced the internees' sense of cultural identity. And it was on this day, May 3rd, in 1946, that Frida Kahlo gave a painting called Weeping Coconuts to her dear friends Lena and Arcady Beutler as a wedding gift. In the painting, Frida used 2 weeping coconuts as a representation of her personal pain and deteriorating health. Now, at this point in her life, Frida Kahlo was mixing prescription painkillers and alcohol. The coconuts were one of 55 self-portraits, with her best known called Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird. Frida Kahlo said, "I paint myself because I am so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." 4 years later, Frida's pain became unmanageable, and in 1953, her right foot and then leg were amputated. 2 surgeries there. Frida died shortly after her 47th birthday in the summer of 1954. And before she died, she wrote these words in her journal: "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return. Frida." Well, Frida's portrait of the 2 weeping coconuts got me doing a little bit of research on coconuts. Coconuts are an ancient plant that scientists believe now originally hailed from the South Pacific. And because of their buoyancy, coconuts were able to travel the world on the waves of the ocean. And so plant explorers found the coconut growing throughout the Pacific, throughout the Indian Ocean regions, and Africa. And just like mangoes, cashews, and cherries, the coconut is actually a drupe, not a nut. And just as a reminder, the drupe is a fleshy fruit that has a central stone containing the seed. So think plums, almonds, or olives. Now, coconuts have gotten really popular, especially coconut oil, because coconuts are so good for us. They're antiviral, they're antifungal, they're antibacterial, and they're anti-parasite. And there are more than 20 billion coconuts produced each year. And before the dominance of soybean oil in the 1960s, it was coconut oil that was the world's leading vegetable oil. Coming up, May 8th is National Coconut Cream Pie Day, so get ready for that. And finally, coconuts can be dangerous. Falling coconuts kill 150 people every year, and that's 10 times the number of people killed by sharks. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Understanding Orchids by William Kalina. This book came out in 2004, and the subtitle is An Uncomplicated Guide to Growing the World's Most Exotic Plants. Well, I myself have become an orchid lover, an orchid fan. They're my favorite plant to send to a family member for a birthday or an anniversary because they last so long. And now, because orchids cost as much as a bouquet, I often opt to send an orchid instead of a bouquet of fresh cut flowers. Now, as a little bonus for me, some of my family members will actually bring me the orchid after it's bloomed, and then I get the honor of taking care of it, repotting it, and getting it healthy and ready to go again so that it will bloom again, hopefully on their next birthday or anniversary. And so that's what I love to do, is to take care of orchids after they've bloomed. But you know, orchids are a little bit of a mystery to many, many gardeners. So if you haven't gone down the orchid path yet, but you're on the edge and you want to become more skilled in the area of orchids, well then William Kalina's book is the perfect guide for you. And William knows what it's like to be in your shoes. He writes here at the end of his introduction, "I still get that spine-tingling, toe-tickling feeling of wow that hooked me at the beginning. And if you're just starting out with orchids, you are in for quite an adventure." William writes, "Learning to grow orchids and understand their idiosyncrasies is a true journey. The sheer number of orchid species, estimates range between 25 and 40,000, including hybrids, means that there will always be something new to learn, something new to explore. And then he writes this incredible fact: you could start acquiring an orchid a day when you were 20 years old and still not have grown them all when you turned 80. And there is no other family of plants that offers such incredible diversity. Now, before I close out this review, I'll just say that the first part of William's book covers all the basics when it comes to orchids. And then William gives a great overview about an area that people often struggle with, and that is how to care for orchids. How do they like to be watered? What should you do about fertilization? How should you pot them? If you're going to mount them, how does that happen? And then he also talks about what to do if you have a pest issue or a disease issue with your orchid. And then if you are getting into next level orchid growing, then William will be your guy for introducing you to reproduction. He'll tell you how to hand pollinate, how to propagate, and hybridize orchids. And there will be no mystery. William is very clear in every page of his book. And then finally, William wraps things up with a look at over 100 of the most popular orchids to get you on your way and to get you thinking about what you want on your orchid wish list. This book is 272 pages of orchids by an orchid lover, for orchid lovers, or for people who are thinking about becoming orchid lovers. You can get a copy of Understanding Orchids by William Kalina and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $20. Finally, we end the show today with a Botanic Spark that celebrates the birthday of the Belgian-American writer and poet May Sarton, who was born on this day, May 3rd, in 1912. May's tiny home in Nelson, New Hampshire, was her happy place. She had a garden that she loved, and she cared for many houseplants there. And she once wrote these relatable garden witticisms. I am not a greedy person, except about flowers and plants, and then I become fanatically greedy. When she was in her 70s, May reflected, a garden is always a series of losses set against a few triumphs, like life itself. Still, May could not help but strive for glory when it came to her garden. She lived mostly a very simple life, but her garden was the one place she dreamed big. May wrote, what a relief to me it was to read that Vita Sackville West kept a pile of metal labels in a shack at Sissinghurst as proof of all the experiments that had failed. And finally, some of May's thoughts on gardening are very prayer-like, as the time she wrote, help us to be ever faithful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness nothing comes to birth, and without light nothing flowers. And May wrote, everything that slows us down and forces patience, everything that sets us back into the slow circles of nature is a help. Gardening is an instrument of grace. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful garden meditation day. Just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.